Hi there. Happy Yule. I see that we're all socially distanced here, so I'm going to take off my mask. Don't worry. I've been vaccinated. I've also gotten my booster shot. Hi, my name's Jason. Bill said, "Hey Jason, will you make a video for the Llewellyn online Yule Party?" And I said, "Wow, what a great thing to be able to do. My friend Gwen Raven is doing an online workshop where he'll get to sell books. I get to do an online thing for all of you, which will result in absolutely no book sales to me. But hey, I like a lot of you, and I know a lot of you, and I'm wishing you a very happy and joyous Yuletide." Bill told me to talk for 20 minutes, but who wants to hear me talk for 20 minutes? Especially during this most wonderful time of the year. So I'll try to keep it quick and brief. Just a little couple of thoughts about the history of this time of year. What I like to refer to as Yuletide. I know a lot of my pagan and witch friends celebrate the holiday of Yule specifically, but Yule means a lot of different things to many different people. Yule has been used as a synonym for Christmas now for 800 years. So I know my grandparents, who definitely were not witches or pagans, would say Yule every once in a while. And in a lot of places around the world, people still say Yule as a synonym for Christmas. The idea of Yuletide meant an extended holiday season, and that's how I like to celebrate Yule today. In the ancient world, the Norse and Germanic peoples probably celebrated a holiday called Yule that we don't know a whole lot about how they celebrated it or when exactly they did celebrate it, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. And then, of course, Yule is also a modern day holiday. It's the day that many witches and pagans and other magical people celebrate the winter solstice. So before we start, I know you're having a rockin' holiday party, so I'll say cheers to you. And, of course, this is an old custom, drinking near the winter solstice. It's very good scotch. I wish you were here with me. It's an 8-year-old Glen Murray. Glen Murray. Looks like Glen Moray, but it's pronounced Glen Murray. Anyways, drinking near the winter solstice is a very, very old custom. It comes to us from the Norse Yule, but probably more than anything else in our society, it comes to us from the Roman Saturnalia. And a lot of the things that we do this time of year are directly related to what people did 2,000 years ago to celebrate the Saturnalia. Here's a little quote from about 1,600 years ago about the Saturnalia. "Each man shall take the couch where he happens to be. Rank, family, or wealth shall have little influence on privilege, that is, on a person's place at the table. All shall drink of the same wine, and neither stomach trouble nor headache shall give the rich man an excuse for being the only one to drink better quality. All shall have their meat on equal terms. The waiter shall not show favor to anyone. Neither are large portions to be placed before one and tiny ones before another, nor ham for one and a pig's jaw for another. All must be treated equally. When a rich man gives a banquet to his servants on the Saturnalia, his friends shall aid him in waiting on them." It's a very different time of year during the ancient Roman times when it came to Saturnalia. It was a time of happiness and joy. It was a time for inverting the social order, and it was a time for gluttony, and it was a time to drink a lot. There are a couple of reasons for all the gluttony and the drinking. Food is very available in mid-December. Part of the reason for that is because if you were going to cull the herds for winter, you would have done that. And you can keep the meat cold, so there's plenty of meat to eat. The crops have been raised. And then most importantly about those crops, they've been fermented. So there would have been alcoholic beverages to drink in abundance. So what a great time of year. And yeah, it's cold and dark, so there's not a whole lot to do. So why not celebrate with a good drink and a nice big meat of pig's jaw? Or ham. Hopefully everyone got ham. That never went out of style either. That whole idea of having a really good time in December and eating a lot and drinking a lot. Even when Christianity took over, that idea persisted and remained. You can see it in medieval courts. You can see it as late as 1712. This is a quote from Increase Mather, the son of Cotton Mather. I bet Christmases were a real blast at the Mather household. Increase complained about Christmas. "The feast of Christ's nativity is spent in reveling, dicing, carding, masking, in all sorts of lascivious liberty, by mad mirth, by long eating, by hard drinking, by lewd gaming, by rude reveling." He's a joy. What a great man. Anyway, the whole point is all of these things that people were doing near the Saturnalia, they were still doing at Christmas over 1,000 years later. And all of those customs and traditions survived because Christians took a lot of traditions from the Roman Saturnalia. I mean, a lot of those Christians had been pagans a week before. Why not change? Why not do that? If you don't know anything about the Saturnalia, it was celebrated from about 300 BCE to 500 CE of the Common Era. Just a pretty good run for a holiday. I would argue that Christmas isn't much different than the Saturnalia. One of the things about the Saturnalia wasn't quite near Christmas. It was about a week before, and it was a week-long celebration, probably originally the 16th of December, and then it was extended out for an entire week. And that would, of course, included a little bit of the winter solstice. There was more to the Saturnalia, though, than just drinking and eating, though not a lot. There were a lot of decorations that might be familiar to many of you this time of year. Evergreen branches, mistletoe, holly, ivy. People decorated with all of those for Saturnalia. Why did they decorate with those things for the Saturnalia? Probably because they were green, and they were the only green things that people could find, so it made sense to decorate with that. Also, at that same time, people sang a lot of carols. Now, they're not exactly the carols that we sing today or whatever, but they would have been similar in that they would have been contemporary and that everyone would have known them. And, the Mariah Carey of the era probably had the most popular one or something. But they did sing carols, which is why Christians later sang a lot of Christmas carols. And originally, a lot of the Christmas carols used the same melodies as the Saturnalia carols. There's another thing that happened at Saturnalia, and it's called misrule. And this is a tradition that's been largely marginalized and set aside, beginning in the 19th century, mostly because people in the middle class, especially in the United States, didn't want to play along. But the idea of misrule was to subvert the social order. There were easy ways to subvert the social order. For example, during Saturnalia, there was a lot of cross-dressing, which is a fun way to subvert the social order. But often the social order was subverted by having the rich wait on the poor. And the quote that I opened this up with, like it seems like 80 minutes ago, but I promise it's only been a few. In that quote, you had people who owned slaves waiting on their slaves. And I know slavery is gross, but it was a part of the Roman Empire. And during that period of time, things were often kind of reversed, where the slaves got the best things just like their masters and rich people did. And later on, a lot of these traditions kind of showed up in other ways. The English tradition of wassail, for instance, is very much related to misrule. Today, we often think of wassailing as something fun, like singing Christmas carols. We're just going to go door to door and wassail. But actually, wassail was more kind of like an excuse to get drunk for a while and perhaps to do petty vandalism. Because when people used to go wassailing, they would either exchange stories and songs and small plays to the rich for good food and drink, or they would bring really crappy booze, and then they would exchange that crappy booze for good booze. And if you didn't play along as a rich person, well, there were consequences, which were petty vandalism. So everyone usually played along. One scholar called it a great social safety valve. Also, from that period of time with the Romans is another holiday known as the January calends. The calends were the beginning of every month in ancient Rome, and people always celebrated the start of every month, which sounds like fun to me. We need more holidays in America, so I kind of wish we'd do this ourselves. But one of the things about the calends is eventually January became the start of the new year, and it was a time for gift giving. One writer wrote, "Everywhere may be seen carousals and well-laden tables. Luxurious abundance is found in the houses of the rich, but also in the houses of the poor. Better food than usual is put upon the table." This is important in case you were wondering about spending at the holidays. It's definitely not new. The writer goes on, "The impulse to spend seizes everyone. He who the whole year through has taken pleasure in saving and piling up his pence becomes suddenly extravagant. He who was accustomed and preferred to live poorly, now at this feast enjoys himself as much as his means will allow. People are not only generous towards themselves, but also towards their fellow man. A stream of presents pours itself out on all sides." If I mess up while reading, remember, I'm also in celebrating and enjoying the holidays. What are you going to do? So yeah, January calends, lots of gifts. And it was an extended period. It went boom, like linked up very, very well with Saturnalia. And it was like the first extended holiday season. Excellent. Great. And they kept all the decorations up because they just put them up for Saturnalia. So you might as well use all of the same thing. A little north of ancient Rome was ancient Yule, celebrated by Norse and Germanic peoples. Now, as I said before at the beginning, people always think we know a lot about ancient Yule, but people aren't even sure exactly when it was celebrated. We know that it was celebrated at some point near the winter solstice, but was it a 2-month celebration from the middle of November to the middle of January? Was it a week-long celebration? Was it a couple of weeks long? All of those are very real possibilities, and they might have all been happening depending on exactly where you were in the ancient Norse and Germanic worlds. No matter when exactly Yule was celebrated, it would probably happen at least during the winter solstice, since you have all of those months in there. How did they celebrate ancient Yule? Well, they celebrated a lot like the Romans did. Lots of eating. They loved to eat pork during Yule. That was a big thing. So if you're having a Christmas ham this year, I guess thank the Norse and the Romans. It's pretty traditional. But also they did a lot of drinking, just like everybody else. Lots of mead. And they decorated with evergreen branches. They burned Yule logs and they lit candles to drive out the darkness. They also told a lot of ghost stories. Ghosts used to be a huge part of Christmas season for a long time, and it's sort of downplayed, but one of the most famous of all the Christmas stories has a ghost in it. No, I'm not talking about the ghost of Macaulay Culkin's youth in Home Alone. I'm talking about A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, which has the ghosts of Christmas past, present, and yet to come. Definitely not the Christmas ghost of Chris Pratt, unless you happen to be watching Guardians of the Galaxy. All of these jokes are not going to work, and I don't apologize, because I'm not getting paid for this. So, it's fine. But yeah, big holiday. Fun holiday. And when those people converted to Christianity, they kept all of those traditions and just made them a part of the Christmas holiday. Today, Yule, though, tends to mean the celebration of the winter solstice by pagans and witches and other magical folk. And though it has a lot in common with the ancient celebrations of Saturnalia and Yule, because we do a lot of those things and decorate in many of the same ways, it also means different things, because I think we put a modern spin and a modern gloss on it. One of those is, in a lot of places, we truly celebrate the start of winter on the winter solstice. Now, there's a lot of kind of debate in the pagan world, like when exactly do we start winter? Some people say, oh yes, Halloween is kind of the beginning of winter, and so they call the winter solstice midwinter. You know, everything depends on where you live. In Minnesota, perhaps, you know, the winter solstice marks the third of 6 months of winter, perhaps. So I guess maybe that's still midwinter. You know, whatever. But it celebrates either kind of the apex of winter or the start of winter, depending on wherever it is that you lived. As somebody who used to live in Michigan, it was definitely just another bump in the road on a long, long winter. For most witches and pagans, too, it's the time of the year where we celebrate the rebirth of the sun, because the days are going to get longer after the winter solstice. So magically, it's a great time to get rid of something that you want or to begin a new cycle of trying to get something that you want, because it represents the waxing part of the year, which are great for new beginnings. One of the things about that rebirth of the sun, in like my coven, we often do sort of like a reenactment of a sun deity being reborn upon that day. And it doesn't have to be a sun god either. There were a lot of ancient sun goddesses, so why not mess with that myth if you've heard it with only sun gods? There can be sun goddesses, sun queens, sun kings, whatever works for you. A more modern myth, a more modern take on this, is the idea of the Oak King and the Holly King. These are two brothers who battle on the solstices every year. It's the Holly King who dies at the winter solstice, and his place is taken by his brother, the Oak King, who represents the waxing half of the year. Then the Holly King, after his death, rests up in the land beyond. It comes back and challenges his brother on the summer solstice, and then he rules the waning half of the year. A lot of people like to do those sort of rituals. For me, though, what I like to do the most to celebrate Yule is to celebrate it like the Romans did, with lots of joy and happiness and present exchanges with the people that I love and care about, and having big parties. Tonight, I'm actually having a party to celebrate this time of year, which is why I couldn't be here live, because I will be sleeping off a pretty epic hangover. One of the great parts of Yuletide is this is truly the most magical time of the year. We don't often think of it that way, but if you look around, it is really magical. What is Santa Claus other than a magical being? He tours the entire world in 24 hours, gives away trillions of presents, and he instills good cheer in most people. So yeah, this is a very magical time of the year, no matter your religious tradition. I mean, this is the time of year with virgin births and talking donkeys and little drummer boys in mangers, which is so out of left field that I find it quite magical. Also, one of my favorite things, the Krampus. One of the things about the holiday seasons, and I keep saying one of these things, and I really apologize for that, but, I'm just kind of making this up as I go along. One of the things about this season is you never hear, oh, it's a Thanksgiving miracle. Oh, it's a Valentine's Day miracle. But you do hear, oh, it was a Christmas miracle. Very, very often. Because this is the time of year where our society has told us that we should believe in magic. They've told us that magic is all around us. And what better thing to celebrate than magic, especially when you're the most magical publisher in the world. So, enjoy this joyous time of the year. Celebrate like a Roman or a Norse person. Those are both fun ways to do it. Enjoy the magic. And because you're having a holiday party, and I'm sure that you're going to be channeling your inner Roman during this holiday party, I will let you get back to it. And I hope that you have a very festive and joyous holiday season. I'm Jason. This has been fun. Happy Yuletide and Happy New Year.